Hi everybody, let me know if you're hearing me. It looks like everything is working now. Cool, sorry for the delay. Thank you, Andrew, for letting me know that I'm here. Somehow my YouTube account switched over from MandoLessons to my personal account without me really telling it to. And all of a sudden I was streaming to you guys but seeing my personal account info. Nothing seemed like it was working. But now I'm here. I am here. I will play a little more of that tune I was playing. Probably you saw it a couple times. Sergeant Early's Dream. Alright, some people have already recognized it. I'm just going to catch up with the chat here. Alright, hello from the cold north of Maine. Hello back from Maine. Let's see. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all. I'm going to go to an Irish session tonight. It's going to be fun. Somebody says, I have a clarinet. I do have a clarinet. It's not my clarinet, but I don't know how to play it. But there it is. Alright, I think I'm mostly caught up with the chat now. Okay. Cool. Glad everything's working out. I hear you. Yellow Rose Farm says everything's working except for their own internet. Which I totally understand. Cool, I'll play a little more of that tune, Sergeant Early's Dream. It's on my website if you want to learn it. It was actually a request. Somebody sent it in as a request, and I really like the tune. It's become one of my favorites. There it is, Sergeant Early's Dream. A little unusual because it's in D modal. It's in, is that D Dorian? So if you're going to play it, if any of you are whistle players, that's a tune for your C whistle. Because it's got that low C, and it's kind of the equivalent of playing an E minor if you're on a D whistle. Looks like some people still can't see me. If you can't see me but you can hear me, try refreshing your feed. I'm also just going to type it in case you can't hear me. Or hear me, try refreshing your page. See if I can get a couple more people so they can watch. Sorry for those that are still having difficulties. I think everything's working on my end now, and it seems like there's enough folks that can see me that should be just fine. Looks like I'm a little overexposed. I'm just gonna poke a quick button here and let's try that. It looks a little better. Oh, so Srakathez, sorry about the username. I don't know how to pronounce that one. Says Do you know a couple variations of something like that for tripping up the stairs? I'm playing tenor banjo and want to learn one or two variations. My brother's playing mandolin, so it would be great to have variations to make the tune more interesting. Oh, and he said, sorry about the English, but your English is totally great. Your English is an infinite amount better than my German. I don't know tripping up the stairs off the top of my head. But maybe I can talk a little bit about variation in general. Oh, Max asked if I can play some jazz tunes. Is mandolin suitable for jazz? It definitely is suitable for jazz. I can play some sort of jazzy stuff. Oh, Uncle Bobby, thank you so much for the $10 donation. I really, really appreciate it. All right, I can call the person's username that I can't pronounce Mike. So yeah, Mike, I'll talk a little bit about variation, but again, thank you so much for the super chat, Uncle Bobby. The donation is greatly appreciated. Yeah, so let's see. I think Tripping Up the Stairs is a reel in the key of D. So maybe I'll just pick another tune that I can think of right now. That might be a tune that I can follow in sessions, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Actually, I just made a couple lessons. I'll give you you dedicated live stream followers a little heads up. I've got a couple lessons coming out where I talk about some variations that I use all the time, including on tenor banjo. I love that sort of stuff. So I think, what did I use? If I use a tune like the Virginia, which is a common Irish session tune in the key of D. So that's the tune. It may be familiar to you. And there's a couple things that you can do to do variations, whether it's this tune or another tune. One thing that I talk about in an upcoming video is using octave replacements. So, or just kind of open string drone replacements. So in that tune, starts off with this little phrase, open D string, and then 202 on your A string. Open 2, 2, open 2. And what you can do there, if you want to fill it out with just a little bit of kind of like a drone variation, you can, instead of hitting that open D string, you can hit the open G string. And then probably another melody player, if you're playing, you mentioned your brother, I think, plays mandolin? Is that what you said? Yeah. If they hit the open D and you hit the open G, you get this nice... You're sort of building out this chord by throwing in low note drone strings below. You can also do that another example that I used in some upcoming lessons is talking about just dropping in different octaves. So what did I use? I used the B part of Miss McLeod's. No, not Miss McLeod's, Miss Monahan's. Which I'll play Miss Monahan's a little bit. B part. So what I'm doing there, the normal melody kind of leads up to that D. And what I'm doing is instead of hitting that D, so that's 2, 4, 5 on the A string, I I hit the open D string below it. So it kind of creates this, again, you're hitting an open string, you're creating kind of a drone below. You get that nice, and then you resolve it by then hitting that 5th fret that is the melody on the A string. So I love doing things like that. Really starts filling out the melody. You can also do triplets. I love adding in triplets. I've got some lessons on my website about adding triplets and how to get that really snappy sound. Out of the tune. And if you want to go further afield with your variations, one thing that you can try is try playing one measure of the tune as written, and then one measure where you at least give yourself the freedom, even if it's sort of a mental freedom, to just be a little looser with the melody, or try a little scale part replacement. Do something to change the tune a little bit. So you have straight melody, and then one for a measure, then one measure of a little bit of variation, and then another measure of straight melody, and then another measure of variation. So what that could sort of end up turning into is something like... This is straight melody. That was variation. Melody. Variation. Melody. Variation. And by giving yourself smaller chunks rather than sort of having the wide open field of, oh, I'm going to create variations for an entire A part, B part sort of cycle, you're just giving yourself a little bit, and you can use the melody even in the variation section. Just try to change one little thing at a time, and that I think will greatly improve your... And the more you do it, the better you get at that sort of improvisation and variation, things like that. Arnold McGuire says, I cannot keep my E string on my mandolin. Oh, I was going to say in tune, but it doesn't say in tune. I don't know. So if your strings are breaking on your E string, what I would recommend is checking a couple things. If you can sort of diagnose where the break is happening, if it's always breaking either at the tuner or at the nut or at the bridge or at the tailpiece, that'll tell you where the string is breaking. And often it'll be at the bridge or at the nut. And what you do at that point is you can take a little piece of very fine sandpaper, and you don't want to really reshape the nut at all. You just want to see if you can take off just the tiniest little sharp, harsh edges. Same thing for the bridge. So you get in that slot where the string is breaking, if it is breaking in a slot. That's a very common fix. So that could be something to look into. Also, a cheap and easy fix if you want to bring it to someone who's more comfortable doing work on instruments. I'm going to continue looking through the chat. When I pick on the A and E strings, my pick taps against the fretboard and makes pick noise. What would be a good exercise to stop that? So that's a very common thing. It's called pick click. I would expect you're playing either an F-style mandolin or an A-style mandolin with a long extension, or some people call it the Florida because it looks kind of like the state Florida. Some people, this mandolin doesn't have it. Some people have sort of shorter extensions on their instrument, but if you have that long extension, something physical you can do is you can have a luthier scoop it out so it's not as tall, so you still see the extension, but it just doesn't have any frets. Or what you can do, in terms of technique, that's sort of a drastic change, and if you want to just change your technique a little bit, one of my friends, who's also a mandolin player and teacher, talks about thinking of your pick and the effort you put into your pick and the attack you put into your pick as taking one of those wide brooms and brushing like a wood floor or a concrete floor. When you're using a push broom, you're not digging down into the floor, it's really kind of just across the top, and you just have this feeling of enough pressure to move the dirt, but not enough pressure that you're wasting all this energy trying to push a broom through a solid floor. And you can think of that same idea with a mandolin, where if you're thinking about how much your pick is sticking through, I'll unzip here so I can get a little white background. That should be easier to see. You know, how much of your pick is sticking through, and if there's a lot, you're going to get that pick click. But if you work on just playing just as much as you need, I'll play over the fretboard. I'm going to zip back up because it's a little cold in here, and it's going to hit my zipper all day if I don't. So I'll play over the fingerboard to sort of emulate that pick click, what you're talking about there. So I think that's the sound you're talking about. And you can eliminate a lot of it by just keeping an eye on how much your pick is really going through the strings. And I'm still hitting a little bit. I don't play up here generally, so I'm not used to. I guess I use a little more pick depth than that usually. But it's a nice sound to play up in that area. It's a little warmer of a sound. So that's my thoughts on that. Mike says those are double stops, right? Yeah. So that's double stops have a couple different definitions, sort of the phrase double stops. It can often, in bluegrass music, mean this sort of that's often referred to as double stops, and it's a different sound from sort of using those drone string open double stops. But I think the way I use the term double stop is anytime you're playing more than one string at a time. That's sort of you could maybe define it more closely as a drone string double stop versus up the neck double stop. Really, whatever you want to call things is great. And I do recommend putting names to things because we're very language-oriented humans. Humans are very language-oriented. And if you can put a name to something, it'll sort of enter your playing quicker, in my experience. And it's easier to remember to do and how to do it when it comes around. If you can just put a name. It doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. But just by naming something, you can really get more techniques and styles and things into your playing. All right, let's see. Catching up with the chat that's always jumping around. Little Muddy Farm says, could you explain what and when to use the drone string? So yeah, what I would recommend there, rather than me going through it here, if you look up in the technique and fundamentals section of my website, there's at the bottom of the page, there's a double stop series. And I believe the first one talks about using those drone strings, when to use them, where to use them. In general, I'll go through my sort of little quick idea that I kind of get to at the end of the lesson, but I recommend watching that whole series if you're into double stops. In general, with open string drone double stops, if you're playing in the key of G, safe open strings to play are the G string and the D string, and you're going to not want to drone on A or E strings. In the key of D, you're going to drone on a D string and an A string and avoid the G and E strings as open strings. And in the key of A, your safe drone strings are A and E. And those are some of the most common keys. And in terms of when to use them, what I recommend doing is using them a lot in your playing. You know, you can take a tune, and throw them everywhere all the time, and it's probably not going to be the most artistic, beautiful sound you've ever heard or imagined creating. But what it does, if you can also at the same time say, like, oh, it's important to play one here, and then you can sort of leave some out for a while, and then things like that. Often it's going to be maybe at the top of a measure, the top of a phrase, on the downbeat. But that said, if you get too static in where you throw in double stops, it's going to get a little boring and a little heavy-handed, in my opinion. So some variation in where you throw in double stops is great, and I think the best way to do that is experiment, see what sounds best to your ears. Cool. Yellow Rose Farm says, I'm 8 years old and just learned to play Flop-Eared Mule and Old Joe Clark. Great tunes to learn. Those are real classics, and those will get you far. And you're coming to Maine Fiddle Camp. Awesome. I look forward to seeing you there and meeting you and playing some mandolins. The Pelican is playing an F style. Yeah, so that's the most likely mandolin to have that long extension. All right, Dean made it. Thanks for joining us. Mike says, can you give me a tip on how to learn these double stops? I don't have a teacher. Okay, so that's sort of, I think I just answered that question. Look up the double stop series at the bottom of the page of Techniques and Fundamentals on MandoLessons.com. Just because I haven't plugged it, it seems like there's a lot of familiar faces here, but in case you aren't aware of my website, MandoLessons.com, it's where I have all my lessons that you can find here on YouTube, as well as play-along tracks that you can stream free from there. The sheet music you can find there. You can find technique and fundamentals. It's easier to find some of the organized series, a lot of other supplemental information. So check it out if you haven't already. Dean says, been working on East Tennessee Blues. Great tune. Could you show some double stops you're using, especially on the B part? If I can remember how this tune goes, let's see. Oh yeah, B part's got great. The B part's got great opportunities for some double stops. One thing I like to do, so the melody is going, and I don't know exactly how I taught this tune in my lesson, but adapt this to, it's going to be close. If it's really notey, if for some reason I made the B part really notey, just take some of those notes out. The skeleton anyway is, key of C. Let's see. One thing you can start with is just kind of sliding and hitting that open E string as a drone. Same thing, next string down. Open A string as a drone for your, what's under, over, it's going to be over an F chord, so that A is your third of the F chord. So you're getting little chord bits. E drone, A drone. You can fill that out a little bit by adding your first finger on the third fret of your E string and hammering on from 5 to 7 on your A, and ending with 3 and 3 as a little bar. And then you can do the same thing. Add in that C on the G string if you want for that F chord. And yeah, that's the main spot that I use as double stops. It's nice to really be able to dig into those. I haven't played that tune in a long time. Let's see what else I can find here in the chat. I hope that's helpful. Give me East Tennessee Blues. Yeah, okay. So Mike asked how to put them in different tunes. Again, I'd recommend that double stop series on the website. Oh, all right. Jeff asked, do you know any fun Irish polkas that could be used for today's festivities? I do, and I have some on my website. You can sort the tunes on my website by tune type. It's sort of the bottom rightmost link when you're on the lessons tab. I've got a couple polkas. Bonnie Tammy, which is a Scottish tune, but I think can work in the Irish tradition. Birches Full of Stitches, that's a great tune. Newmarket Polka. The Road to Boston. That's a polka? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's a polka. I'll play Birches Full of Stitches. That's a great tune that a lot of people are going to know. What key is this in? So key A. A lovely tune and a very classic polka. Favorite tunes and a real classic that a lot of people are going to know. In the key of A. That's also a great tune if you want to add in some double stops to really experiment with just hitting those open A and E strings. So when I'm playing that first phrase, I'm just hitting the open E the whole time. Etc. Great suggestion. I love polkas. I should put some more polkas up on the site. There's lots of good ones. Sean says, beautiful Gibson, looks like it's in great shape. I love this mandolin. I actually just got it recently. I know a little bit of the backstory of it. It was the folks that I bought it from. It was the father or grandfather, I don't know, I guess probably, yeah, it would be father, bought it in 1925 and it's a 1924, so yeah, he bought it new and then played it for a while, but then got a tenor banjo and ended up joining a tenor banjo club, put the mandolin under the bed, the literal bed. A lot of times it's a proverbial bed, but it didn't get played a whole lot, so yeah, it's in great shape. I really am enjoying playing it. Gonna catch up with the chat here. So the Pelican says, in the key of G, I have trouble finding variations of C licks. I guess it would matter with the melody when you go into C. So yeah, I'll make up a little progression here. If we're going something like... So maybe that's our phrase. We got G, C, and then G, and then D. And if I'm going to play play something over that, I might play. So a couple things that I'm just gonna, if Andrew, if you're still here, if you ran, thanks for joining us while you could. Thanks for the super chat donation, always appreciated. And see you soon. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, getting back to sort of C licks. One thing that I like doing, playing around with that little scale. You might know it in G. So it's if let's say on the C as a little C lick. So it's the middle two strings, the D and A strings. We've got 2 and 3, and then 3 and 5, and then 5 and 7. And you can walk that up and down. So you could even use that if something like East Tennessee Blues, you can go. So I was using that little scale, that first part. So we're starting on 5 and 7. And then 3 and 5, and then 2 and 3. 5 and 7, 3 and 5, 2 and 3. Then you can do the same thing in F on the G and D strings with that A string ringing open. So things like that can also using a lot of time when I'm either in the key of C or playing over a C chord in a key that has a C in it. I often will anchor my third finger on that fifth fret of the G string, which is a C. So if it's something like Billy in the Low Ground, my third finger is either right there on that 5th fret or close by and coming back to it as an anchor, because it's a great drone string to have in the key of C or over a C chord. So hopefully that gives you a couple options. Chuck asks the question, how to restring a mandolin. That's ultimately the way I think of it is it's a 3-handed job, and unfortunately we were only built with 2 hands. I remember it being a very frustrating thing to do. I still don't enjoy the process because there's a lot going on. It's sort of a long thing to describe, especially sort of in this short period of time. But what I can tell you is if you look up changing strings on a mandolin or restringing a mandolin, I know there's a couple at least videos on YouTube that'll show you how to do it. You could also look up changing strings on a guitar or ask on Mandolin Cafe. I'm sure there's some, or actually just Google it. I'm sure there are guides on how to restring mandolins out there. So you can follow it step by step. I'm going to have that same problem myself. I'm learning to play pedal steel, which is 10 strings, and it's got this sort of crazy mechanism on what's essentially this end of the instrument. And someday I'm going to have to change those strings, and I'm dreading the prospect because I can tell it's going to be complicated from the get-go. Keith says, new to mandolin, Washburn mandolin, a good choice. I don't know a whole lot about Washburn mandolins. Maybe either some people here can give you some advice, or what I always tell people is ask that same question over on the Mandolin Cafe forum, or search the Mandolin Cafe forum for that model. And there probably are people who have experience with it, or there are even dealers on the website that can sort of talk about different brands and who see tons of mandolins every day. So I'd recommend looking it up over at Mandolin Cafe on the forum. It's a wealth of knowledge, far more than I'll ever know in my lifetime. James says, You'll have to start planning the festivities for that mandolin. Oh, that mandolin's upcoming 100th birthday. Yeah, I guess this thing's 90. What does that make it? 96? That can't be right. 94? 94. Yeah, I'll bake it a cake. uh, the Anna Canavan. Apologies. Okay, so and he says apologies for mispronouncing your screen name there. Any chance for a few sets of reels for St. Patrick's Day? Yeah, I'll play a couple of reels. I'll also play a tune. Your name reminded me of a slip jig, which I believe is on my website, called the Fair-Haired Canavans. There's some tunes sort of hastily thrown together. First tune, the Fair-Haired Canavans, which is on my website. The second tune was a tune called Faith Aaliyah, which is a PEI tune that I was actually playing in the wrong key. It's supposed to be in D, but I played it in G. And that tune's cool because it's half jig, half slip jig. First part's in 6/8, second part's in 9/8. It's not on my website. It was written by a fellow named Elmer Deagle. And the third tune is a reel. It was interesting going from essentially a slip jig into a reel. But the third tune was Miss Thornton's, which is also on my website. All three of those in the key of G, and all three some of my favorite tunes. The first and last being Irish tunes, the middle being a PEI tune. Thanks for the suggestion. I'm going to catch up with the chat now. I've got a request for Flop-Eared Mule. James says has a 21 string sitar with no standard tuning. Whew, yeah, that's a workout. Good for the brain. Okay, nice. Little Muddy Farm has that Washburn. Good to hear. Black Mountain Rag. I can never remember Black Mountain Rag, but that's a great tune. I should do a lesson on it. Justin requests Road to Lisdoon Varna. Great, I can play that. Thomas just dropped in. Great, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. John says, do you have a preferred pick angle? For example, up or down? I think maybe what you're talking about is how the pick, if the pick's going flat through the strings, or the left side of the pick hits the strings first, so it's sort of tipped towards the floor a little bit, or backwards, so the right side of the pick goes through the strings first. I prefer to play what I think maybe you're talking about, or would describe as right. It's often referred to as a right hand bevel. If you get picks that are beveled, that's sort of, they're beveled for that style of, that technique of playing. And so how I sort of describe it is my right arm is usually more or less parallel to the floor, going like this, assuming you're right-handed, whatever your pick hand is, going parallel to the floor. And if my mandolin neck was also parallel to the floor, the pick would be going flat through the strings, sort of parallel to the strings. And that way I find you get a lot of pick noise, and it makes things a little more staccato. Whereas if you tip the neck of the instrument a little bit, about like that, you get a little warmer sound. You get less pick noise, and it's the right part of the pick is going through first. I think maybe that's what you're talking about. But other people, I know that John Reichman, I actually used to play with so I've got really kind of wild hitchhiker thumbs, and I used to kind of get my hitchhiker thumb backward and play with the right part of the pick going through first, sort of that opposite angle, so the pick is angled like this going through the strings. I now play like this, and I recommend that. But my thumb sort of being the way it is, I could get away with playing like that, which I did, and John Reichman still does, and John Reichman is got the best tone around, but I found it a little more uncomfortable for myself in terms of playing. So I trained myself out of the habit and now play with the pick angled like that. I'm going to catch up with the chat again. Great. Bethany says, love starting the mornings with me. I'm glad to have you here. It's a little gray out here, but it's always, well, it's probably gray for you more often being in Oregon. I'm glad you can join us and share the tunes. All right, more requests for Black Mountain Rag lesson. I will add that to my list. Yeah, Ian says, confused with so many types of double stops. Yeah, it's a helpful word, but it would be nice sometimes if there were distinct words for the different kinds of double stops. So I've got a couple of requests. I got Flop-Eared Mule and Road to Lisdoon Varna. I can remember how Road to Lisdoon Varna goes right now, which I can't always, so I'll play that first and then Flop-Eared Mule. So this is on my website. It's a slide, which is actually it's in 12/8. Kind of has this dugga-da, 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 very kind of downbeat heavy feel. Also feels a little bit like a jig because it uses jig picking, but it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. It's four sets of 3. Sounds like this. couple clams for good measure. Pelican 3 asks, have you ever done Get Up John? I have not. I've learned parts of it. Part of that tune, the intrigue of that tune is it's got that funky tuning where you split strings. I've got a lesson out on cross tuning where I talk about Get Up John tuning towards the end. Very cool. You get these cool sort of sounds out of the instrument. I also have a lesson coming out on doing split strings without retuning. So I'm just playing the A string, but splitting with my nail, you can get in between the course and things like that. But it's definitely a process to play that tune because you gotta totally retune. I think Bill had he had a mandolin on stage that was pre-tuned to Get Up John tuning. It's a Bill Monroe tune for those who aren't familiar with it. Really cool tune. It's got a really exciting sound because of the way Bill tunes his mandolin. A request for Flop-Eared Mule was up there somewhere, so I'll play a little bit of that. So that's a great tune. Flop-Eared Mule is a great tune to play when you want to work on double stops. It's actually a tune that I use in the double stop series because you can use a lot of those open string combinations. I'll play it. I'll start out a little simple with no double stops, and then I'll add in some double stops after a while. Flop-Eared Mule with some double stops. Brenda says, I play dulcimer, so I'll need to learn most of my mandolin tunes in the key of D for jamming with my dulcimer friends. That makes a lot of sense. If you want to learn, you can sort the tunes on my website by key if you go to the Lessons tab and in the drop-down on the right-hand side, Fiddle Tunes by key. So you can find all the tunes that are normally in the key of D over there. Calgaro is here. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you again. John asks, do you know the humors of Ennistimen? It's a great tune for St. Paddy's Day. I do not know that tune. At least not by that name. I know a couple humors of tunes, but not that one. Maybe I'll play one of my favorite humors tunes instead. Oh, what is this called? The Humors of Lachine. It's a great jig in the key of G. there it is. That is whatever that tune is. Humors of Lachine is the name of that tune. I don't believe that one is on my website, unfortunately. But it's a good tune. You can probably find it on the session if you read standard notation or recordings of it and learn it by ear. Mike asks about the tune Clumsy Lover, which I still don't know, and the chances of private online lesson. Or maybe you're not talking about private lessons. I don't do private lessons, unfortunately. Maybe that's not what you're asking. To just make a fiddle tune lesson. I think I put it on my list. It's a long list, but it'll get there eventually. I will confess that my list of lessons to make is about as long as the list of lessons that I have made to this date over the past 10 years. But I do give priority to tunes that are requested. So it's in there, and hopefully I can get to it soon. Do I know Gold Rush? Not off the top of my head. I usually just follow people on that one. King of the Fairies. It's an Irish jig. Yes, it's actually a set dance. I have a lesson for it on my website, but I don't ever play it. It doesn't come up in a lot of the Irish sessions that I play in. I don't know that I've ever actually I've never heard it in a session around where I live since I knew it was a tune. Not to say it doesn't happen. I just haven't noticed it. So I don't know it really that well. I made a lesson of it because it's a very popular tune and a lot of people want to learn it, but I have since forgotten how it goes. I kind of learned it for the lesson, and in one ear, out the other. That's what happens when you don't practice tunes, is they slowly or quickly slip away. Well, this has been a great hour. Thank you all so much for joining me. I gotta head on through the rest of the day, but appreciate you all joining me for this another Saturday morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. Always good to see you. I'll be here next weekend, same time, same place, same link. Next weekend I'll hopefully have all my tech difficulties worked out before I start trying to play you all some tunes and answer questions. But yeah, I look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great rest of your weekend. See you soon. Bye.